In today's episode, we're talking with Kiana, who was able to quit her job with just a couple of properties. She had a 10-year stint in finance, but she quickly realized that she wanted to pursue financial freedom. Now she's onto her second property that's cash flowing $3,200 per month. We get into a lot of tactical stuff in today's episode by how she's able to select her properties and also how she overcomes a daunting task of landlord negotiations. Her story's awesome. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot, so let's get right into it. All right, so we got Kiana here, who just started her Airbnb journey a few months ago, if I'm not mistaken. So just wanted to chat with her. She's, doing very well, with the property. And so Kiana, if you don't mind, just kind of discussing your background, and then we'll kind of go into, why you wanted to start this whole, journey with, Airbnbs and just entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored. So I started this originally, I was in Mexico City for a vacation, and a friend kind of introduced me to Airbnb arbitrage. I've always believed in financial freedom. I also worked in finance for over a decade, so I kind of have a little knowledge in that. I started researching this for the last 6 months. I went through different free workshops, and then I found your community, joined it, and that's kind of what helped me pull the trigger to quit my job 3 months later. And then I got my first property a couple months ago. That has been going very well. And then I just signed my second property that's going to go live in a couple of days. So essentially the reason why I started was just for the financial freedom.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't realize you quit your job. So can you talk about that? Because I know in my mind, or just like other people's minds, they get a lot of anxiety when they're they're starting this new business venture, they quit their job. So, what kind of gave you that confidence to be able to, take that leap right away?
Honestly, I think a lot of the research, a lot of the content that you provided as well, the free workshops, but then once I joined your community, having all those resources and then having the calculator, the property feedback kind of gave me more confidence in my decisions and kind of understanding the different real estate markets. I also have some rental properties back in Seattle. And so I think having that knowledge of just kind of how real estate works helps, but I never was introduced to the arbitrage side of it, which I think is very interesting and lower risk.
So yeah, let's talk about the first property. What made you, kind of attracted to that market? How did you talk to the landlord to kind of convince you? If you can kind of just walk us through, kind of from start to finish of how that first property came to be.
So I was looking at a couple of different markets, but I wanted to choose places where at least I knew someone. So my best friend lives in Arizona. And so I started doing research there. I found actually a company that helped me acquire the property and kind of did the conversations with the landlord because I tried it myself. I was not as successful. So I kind of delegated it off. And I thought that was another good way for me to learn as well. And so that's how I kind of chose that market. Close to my best friend. Also, just having a company that helped me find the perfect property for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up, just because, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? And so one of my biggest weaknesses is, I kind of like to think about the big picture. I don't really like to be in the day-to-day. And so that's when, I started figuring out about virtual assistants and then, delegating those tasks. And that really freed up my, kind of mental capacity to go and, do more strategic activities. So, right off the bat, it sounds like, obviously I'm sure you could have gone to the point where you could be comfortable talking to these landlords, but you kind of found something that you weren't as strong at, and then you delegated it to someone that is good at, right? Yeah. So with that property in Arizona that you found, as far as numbers go, I know you said it's doing very well. What do the numbers look like, and what were you kind of projecting when you first started and found the property?
So the original projection on the conservative side was about $2,500 a month. Essentially, that is what I'm at now. So we did the Airbnb for the first 2 months, and then we actually were able to find a 1-year tenant, and so it still hit the same conservative benchmark.
Awesome. Yeah. You get the best of both worlds here in this situation, it sounds like. Okay, so let's kind of talk about, kind of step back a little bit and talk about some of the challenges you might have faced, when starting this business. Because obviously, it's all cool, when you hear about the cool success stories. I'm sure you kind of had to go through some rough patches and hurdles you had to overcome. So what are some of those, challenges that you face, and how did you overcome them?
I would say one of the hardest challenges is finding the market, because there's so many saturated markets, but I think there are different little smaller markets that you can look at, and then understanding what the market was. So I had probably spent 6 months kind of just going around the whole entire United States, kind of researching, understanding short-term laws. I think that is kind of the higher risk on the sides of things. So that was my biggest challenge. And then I started joining these Facebook Airbnb short-term groups, kind of just seeing what locations were popping up more frequently. And then that kind of helped me. And then your team also created that Excel sheet of kind of the markets, which I thought was very helpful because it kind of just consolidates all the information, or just it's more efficient. And also AirDNA, I think that's a great resource, and that was very helpful because it's like you reduce all the calculations and manual work that you have to do, so you can kind of export and kind of figure it that way. So I would say that was the hardest part. And I think from there, landlord outreach is obviously a difficult part if you don't have experience in it, and it can. So that's why I kind of tried it myself, but then I found other resources, joining the cohort meetings and hearing other people's stories, reading about them also in the comments in the community, I think is very helpful. And so landlord outreach was another difficult part. And then setting up the property, I think no matter how much you prepare, no matter how much you like pre-order all the lists, like there's always things that happen, but I think it's just being adaptable and able to just like problem solve very quickly. Essentially, you have to do that when you're a host as well, when things rise in within the property and something doesn't go well for the guests. So I think it's a very good stepping stone to learn how to problem solve as quickly as possible.
Yeah, 100%. The entrepreneurship is just putting out little fires, every single day. And then, eventually, that those wins will add up to where, it frees up your time. But I love that, your story. As far as like the analysis paralysis, right? Because you said you spent about 6 months. So how did you overcome that? Because I know a lot of people get stuck in that. And, someone that, might have spent 6 months, doing all the research, you might have been like, oh, like I've seen so many different things. There's like so many different markets I could go after. Like, how did you kind of start honing in and get away from that analysis paralysis?
I think I started tracking different markets a little closer and looking at the trends. And so once I saw like the 3-month trend, it kind of made me a little more comfortable, either more confident or less confident within the market. And then the property feedback. So even when I did the outreach, your team would do a property feedback for me. And then I'd learn more from that, like what to look for. And then finally, I was like, what do I have to lose and everything to gain? I mean, the overhead cost is not that much and the return is so high. So the worst case scenario is if no one rents out the Airbnb, I can just do another midterm, long-term lease. And I just don't have cash flow, but that's okay. I learned the process. So I think that's the mentality I had, that there's always an exit strategy. And that doesn't mean not completely having to pay out of pocket, but it's just, okay, we learned from this property, let's learn to another one. And so I think from kind of reducing or going through every fear that I had and finding a solution for it kind of built the confidence for me to just finally pull the trigger.
Yeah, because, you could do all the research in the world and you can have, the perfect properties and everything lined up. But if you're not actually going to, move forward, then, nothing's going to change, right? And so I love, that you got the confidence, with the team, being part of a community that can kind of give you that confidence to move forward. So love to hear that. So let's kind of talk about your entrepreneurship journey. Is that something that you've always had on the back of your mind, like this is what you want to do? Like where did that kind of desire to become an entrepreneur come to be?
I think there are two folds to when I went to school. Originally I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad and my family has always been on that side, so it's kind of something I grew up in. My mom always had a corporate job, so having that entrepreneur side also with kind of the W-2 life. I went to school, tried to climb the corporate ladder, and then I finally decided, I was like, you know what? I did the best I can. I learned as much as I could. And I think I gained a lot of great skill sets from it. And entrepreneurship was always in the back of my mind. Financial freedom was always on the front of my mind. And so from that, I think gaining that experience and knowledge and just being able to kind of redirect it to the entrepreneurial side is very helpful. So I think it's always been on the forefront and just finding the right opportunity.
No, 100%. I think, kind of, similar to my parents were entrepreneurs. They were very successful at it, and they had kind of were owner operators, right? So they always kind of told me to like, hey, stay away from, like the restaurant business, whatever that they were doing. And so that kind of always put the fear in the back of my mind. But, once you overcome that and realize, like, if you follow a blueprint of someone that's been there and, you trust that person, then, it can, definitely work out. So, it sounds like we have similar stories from that standpoint. Yeah. So let's kind of talk about kind of more tactical stuff. So for your very first property, we'll talk about your second property here in a second. What are some ways that you looked at the property and were like, okay, I'm going to be able to differentiate myself because of X, Y, and Z? Because obviously, that's, big, that's something that's really crucial in this business. So what were some ways that you were able to differentiate from your competition?
I ended up in Scottsdale, which is the last place I thought I would for the first property because it's so saturated and very popular destination. But what I noticed when I was going through just Airbnb, there were a lot of Bachelor and Bachelorette themes, and I wanted to steer away from that just because of the clientele and kind of those are more seasonal based. And the property I found was right by a golf course. So I kind of just redirected the theme for myself into more luxury, and it came furnished, which was very nice. So it was furnished, luxury, and then I went to boho because I think the boho clientele is something that I'm more tailored to. So I kind of created the Airbnb to be more of a place that I would want to stay at and then make it as comfortable for me. And then when I got to the property, I noticed I have a lot of friends with children. So it's like you don't always want to carry cribs and everything. So I wanted to make it kids baby friendly and kids friendly. And so I added that feature into it to kind of separate myself along with the workspace. So I think my whole approach was to go away from the bachelor parties and party scenes and Scottsdale kind of theme and more for the luxury, for kind of like the PGA Tour, waste management, go for the more family, I think was how I was able to separate myself.
Yeah, that's really awesome stuff right there, because I think a lot of people try to follow the herd, especially in a market like Scottsdale. I know a lot of people are moving towards the Bachelor Bachelorette parties. A couple of things with those. Number one, your properties get a lot more wear and tear on those just because there's a lot of parties, people getting drunk, things like that. And then number two, like when you do kind of have your target audience to go after, especially in families in this case, and obviously kids can be rough sometimes in the properties, but your neighbors are going to be a lot friendlier with you. Your clientele is going to be a lot more respectful. And so I really like that that you were going towards that instead of just trying to chase the dollars where, it might have been a lot easier to go ahead with the Bachelor or Bachelorette theme. So yeah, let's talk about your second property. So is it in the same market where you're like, okay, I want to start scaling, with the economies of scale that I now have, or did you completely find a different market there?
No, it's 10 minutes away from the first property. And the reason why I actually ended up choosing that was because the management company I'm working for kind of had another contract and they're like, well, we already did this one. So kind of pieces came together and they're like, well, if we find another property for you, will it work? And I was like, perfect. Found one 10 minutes away, kind of the same exact style, more for the luxury side, family oriented. And it also came furnished. And so I was like, well, if they're both next to each other, my best friend lives down the street. I mean, it kind of just makes sense. But I am looking to expand outside of there. But right now, it just seems like Scottsdale is working.
Awesome stuff. And the economies of scale is way better at that point because you have the cleaners, the handyman, all your team in place already. And then, they're grateful because they get more business as well. So I think, it really comes with, that. So let's talk about now the kind of the scaling part, because obviously the setup part, it does take some upfront time, right? But once you, go live, we always talk about the systems scaling, making sure that you have all these processes in place so it doesn't just turn into another full-time job. So how, talk to me about your like kind of weekly process of, how you manage it, how long it takes you now that everything's kind of up and live.
I'm very fortunate in the sense that I probably spend about 4 hours a week on it, just watching it, making sure there's no maintenance things or repairs and just following kind of what the guests are and whatnot. The management company is very good at what they do as well, but I think I will be able to scale pretty big because of how I'm able to delegate. And I think that's really important because when my first month, I was kind of the micromanager because I was like trying to be in control. I was very fearful and I was like, well, I kind of have to trust the process, trust the system. And so now that I've kind of overcame that hump after the first month, I was like, you know what? Okay. And I think I gained more time from that. So I was probably spending like, let's say 10 hours a week before. And now from just kind of trusting the process and letting it go and just putting out the fires as they come, I'm able to probably just spend like 4 hours a week, more or less.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things that I realized when, starting your entrepreneurship journey is hiring the right people and then just let them do their thing, right? Because I know, like, I'm the same way. Like, I wanted to like micromanage every little thing. I was getting burnt out. The people that I was managing were getting burnt out. So it's just not a good environment for anyone. But if you make that right hire at the very beginning, then it becomes way easier, and your life and everyone else's life will be much better from that. Cool. So let's talk about like kind of your 6 month to 12-month roadmap. Where do you want to be? Obviously you quit your job, so you have that time to be able to dedicate to that. So what are some of your goals here for the next 6 to 12 months?
The next 6 months, well, I have my next 3 months. 3 months is to get another property. So pretty much a property every quarter, I think is going to be the goal for the next 6 months, more or less. And then from there, we'll kind of see where it takes. Probably want to go for bigger properties or go international, but I'm actually traveling right now. So since I quit my job, I've just been traveling and kind of doing market research that way. I think it's more fun. Yeah, my next 6 months, couple more properties, 12 months, we'll see kind of where it takes off to. I think everything moves so fast, especially when you scale, right? So
you're trying to like take that, kind of time off, while, seeing the world. And also, great thing about this business and, any business that I was going to choose, like had to be done like where I could just do it, on my laptop or on my phone, right? Because I think, with financial freedom, it's not only the money, but it's also the time and location freedom that comes with that. So I'm sure that was a big consideration for you as well.
Yeah, it's definitely the free time kind of use the creative space. So I started writing a book kind of to write about my experience and things like that. And so I think having that freedom and having that energy in the creative space from leaving like the corporate job, I think helps a lot. And you're able to find other opportunities and it's like Airbnb arbitrage. So, and then we'll see where else comes from it.
Yeah, and I didn't know you were writing a book. Once it's done, let us know so we can kind of publish on our channels as well.
I appreciate it.
So yeah, let's to wrap this up. Let's just talk about what's some piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur that wants to start an Airbnb business or just whatever business in general. Like, what would you say to that person?
I would tell them that preparation is key, of course, diligence, but also just to trust yourself and know that if you've already done the research, then all you have to do is just kind of take that leap of faith. And from there, you already problem solve probably a lot of other things that you don't realize on your day-to-day life or in your day job or your business that you have. So this is kind of the same thing. Uncertainty is really great. You never know what's going to come from it. So I think finding the right community, finding the right support, and know that you're not alone, especially if you find that right one. And so I think that's very helpful.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the insights. Thanks for the time. Kiana, it was good to chat with you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.